This is Fyodor Dostoyevsky's Crime and Punishment, a classic work of public domain literature. Chapter 6. "I don't believe it. I can't believe it," repeated Razumihin, trying in perplexity to refute Raskolnikov's arguments. They were by now approaching Bakalaev's lodgings, where Pulcheria Alexandrovna and Dunya had been expecting them a long while. Razumihin kept stopping on the way in the heat of discussion, confused and excited by the very fact that they were for the first time speaking openly about Ite. "Don't believe it, then," answered Raskolnikov with a cold, careless smile. "You were noticing nothing as usual, but I was weighing every word." "You are suspicious. That is why you weighed their words, certainly I agree." Porfiry's tone was rather strange, and still more that wretch Zametov. "You are right, there was something about him, but why?" "Why? He has changed his mind since last night." "Quite the contrary. If they had that brainless idea, they would do their utmost to hide it and conceal their cards so as to catch you afterwards. But it was all impudent and careless. If they had had facts, real facts, or at least grounds for suspicion, then they would certainly have tried to hide their game in the hope of getting more. They would have made a search long ago besides. But they have no facts, not one. It is all mirage, all ambiguous. Simply a floating idea. So they tried to throw me out by impudence. And perhaps he was irritated at having no facts and blurted it out in his vexation. Or perhaps he has some plan. He seems an intelligent man. Perhaps he wanted to frighten me by pretending to know. They have a psychology of their own, brother. But it is loathsome explaining it all. Stop. And it's insulting. I understand you. But since we have spoken openly now, and it is an excellent thing that we have at last, I am glad. I will own now frankly that I noticed it in them long ago, this idea. Of course, the merest hint only, an insinuation. But why an insinuation even? How dare they? What foundation have they? If only you knew how furious I have been. Think only. Simply because a poor student, unhinged by poverty and hypochondria, on the eve of a severe delirious illness, note that, suspicious, vain, proud, who has not seen a soul to speak to for 6 months, in rags and in boots without soles, has to face some wretched policeman and put up with their insolence and the unexpected debt thrust under his nose, the IOU presented by Chibarov, the new paint, 30 degrees rear myrrh and a stifling atmosphere, a crowd of people, the talk about the murder of a person where he had been just before, and all that on an empty stomach. He might well have a fainting fit. And that is what they found it all on. Damn them. I understand how annoying it is, but in your place, Rodya, I would laugh at them, or better still, spit in their ugly faces, and spit a dozen times in all directions. I'd hit out in all directions neatly too, and so I'd put an end to it. Damn them. Don't be downhearted. It's a shame. He really has put it well, though, Raskolnikov thought. Damn them. But the cross-examination again tomorrow, he said with bitterness. Must I really enter into explanations with them? I feel vexed as it is that I condescended to speak to Zametov yesterday in the restaurant. Damn it! I will go myself to Porfiry. I will squeeze it out of him, as one of the family. He must let me know the ins and outs of it all. And as for Zametov, at last he sees through him, thought Raskolnikov. Stay, cried Razumihin, seizing him by the shoulder again. Stay, you were wrong. I have thought it out. You are wrong. How was that a trap? You say that the question about the workmen was a trap, but if you had done that, could you have said you had seen them painting the flat and the workmen? On the contrary, you would have seen nothing, even if you had seen it. Who would own it against himself? If I had done that thing, I should certainly have said that I had seen the workmen and the flat, Raskolnikov answered, with reluctance and obvious disgust. But why speak against yourself? Because only peasants, or the most inexperienced novices, deny everything flatly at examinations. If a man is ever so little developed and experienced, he will certainly try to admit all the external facts that can't be avoided, but will seek other explanations of them, will introduce some special, unexpected turn that will give them another significance and put them in another light. Porfiry might well reckon that I should be sure to answer so, and say I had seen them to give an air of truth, and then make some explanation. But he would have told you at once that the workmen could not have been there 2 days before, and that therefore you must have been there on the day of the murder at 8 o'clock. And so he would have caught you over a detail. Yes, that is what he was reckoning on, that I should not have time to reflect, and should be in a hurry to make the most likely answer, and so would forget that the workmen could not have been there 2 days before. But how could you forget it? Nothing easier. It is in just such stupid things clever people are most easily caught. The more cunning a man is, the less he suspects that he will be caught in a simple thing. The more cunning a man is, the simpler the trap he must be caught in. Porphyry is not such a fool as you think. He is a knave, then, if that is so. Raskolnikov could not help laughing. But at the very moment he was struck by the strangeness of his own frankness, and the eagerness with which he had made this explanation, though he had kept up all the preceding conversation with gloomy repulsion, obviously with a motive from necessity. I am getting a relish for certain aspects, he thought to himself. But almost at the same instant he became suddenly uneasy, as though an unexpected and alarming idea had occurred to him. His uneasiness kept on increasing. They had just reached the entrance to Bakalaev's. "Go in alone," said Raskolnikov suddenly. "I will be back directly." "Where are you going?" "Why, we are just here." "I can't help it. I will come in half an hour. Tell them." "Say what you like. I will come with you." "You, too, want to torture me," he screamed, with such bitter irritation, such despair in his eyes that Razumihin's hands dropped. He stood for some time on the steps, looking gloomily at Raskolnikov, striding rapidly away in the direction of his lodging. At last, gritting his teeth and clenching his fist, he swore he would squeeze Porphyry like a lemon that very day, and went up the stairs to reassure Pulcheria Alexandrovna, who was by now alarmed at their long absence. When Raskolnikov got home, his hair was soaked with sweat, and he was breathing heavily. He went rapidly up the stairs, walked into his unlocked room, and at once fastened the latch. Then, in senseless terror, he rushed to the corner, to that hole under the paper where he had put the things, put his hand in, and for some minutes felt carefully in the hole, in every crack and fold of the paper. Finding nothing, he got up and drew a deep breath. As he was reaching the steps of Bakalaev's, he suddenly fancied that something, a chain, a stud, or even a bit of paper in which they had been wrapped with the old woman's handwriting on it, might somehow have slipped out and been lost in some crack, and then might suddenly turn up as unexpected, conclusive evidence against him. He stood as though lost in thought, and a strange, humiliated, half-senseless smile strayed on his lips. He took his cap at last and went quietly out of the room. His ideas were all tangled. He went dreamily through the gateway. "Here he is himself!" shouted a loud voice. He raised his head. The porter was standing at the door of his little room and was pointing him out to a short man who looked like an artisan, wearing a long coat and a waistcoat, and looking at a distance remarkably like a woman. He stooped, and his head in a greasy cap hung forward. From his wrinkled, flabby face he looked over 50. His little eyes were lost in fat, and they looked out grimly, sternly, and discontentedly. "What is it?" Raskolnikov asked, going up to the porter. The man stole a look at him from under his brows, and he looked at him attentively, deliberately. Then he turned slowly and went out of the gate into the street without saying a word. "What is it?" cried Raskolnikov. "Why, there was asking whether a student lived here, mentioned your name and whom you lodged with. I saw you coming and pointed you out, and he went away. It's funny." The porter too seemed rather puzzled, but not much so, and after wondering for a moment he turned and went back to his room. Raskolnikov ran after the stranger, and at once caught sight of him walking along the other side of the street with the same even, deliberate step, with his eyes fixed on the ground, as though in meditation. He soon overtook him, but for some time walked behind him. At last, moving on to a level with him, he looked at his face. The man noticed him at once, looked at him quickly, but dropped his eyes again, and so they walked for a minute side by side without uttering a word. "You were inquiring for me, of the porter?" Raskolnikov said at last, but in a curiously quiet voice. The man made no answer. He didn't even look at him. Again they were both silent. "Why do you come and ask for me and say nothing? What's the meaning of it?" Raskolnikov's voice broke, and he seemed unable to articulate the words clearly. The man raised his eyes this time and turned a gloomy, sinister look at Raskolnikov. "Murderer," he said suddenly in a quiet but clear and distinct voice. Raskolnikov went on walking beside him. His legs felt suddenly weak, a cold shiver ran down his spine, and his heart seemed to stand still for a moment, then suddenly began throbbing as though it was set free. So they walked for about 100 paces, side by side in silence. The man did not look at him. "What do you mean? What is? Who is a murderer?" muttered Raskolnikov hardly audibly. "You are a murderer," the man answered still more articulately and emphatically, with a smile of triumphant hatred, and again he looked straight into Raskolnikov's pale face and stricken eyes. They had just reached the crossroads. The man turned to the left without looking behind him. Raskolnikov remained standing, gazing after him. He saw him turn round 50 paces away and look back at him still standing there. Raskolnikov could not see clearly, but he fancied that he was again smiling, the same smile of cold hatred and triumph. With slow, faltering steps, with shaking knees, Raskolnikov made his way back to his little garret, feeling chilled all over. He took off his cap and put it on the table, and for 10 minutes he stood without moving. Then he sank exhausted on the sofa, and with a weak moan of pain he stretched himself on it. So he lay for half an hour. He thought of nothing. Some thoughts or fragments of thoughts, some images without order or coherence floated before his mind. Faces of people he had seen in his childhood or met somewhere once whom he would never have recalled. The belfry of the church at V, the billiard table in a restaurant, and some officers playing billiards, the smell of cigars in some underground tobacco shop, a tavern room, a back staircase quite dark, all sloppy with dirty water and strewn with eggshells, and the Sunday bells floating in from somewhere. The images followed one another, whirling like a hurricane. Some of them he liked and tried to clutch at, but they faded, and all the while there was an oppression within him, but it was not overwhelming. Sometimes it was even pleasant. The slight shivering still persisted, but that too was an almost pleasant sensation. He heard the hurried footsteps of Razumihin. He closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep. Razumihin opened the door and stood for some time in the doorway as though hesitating. Then he stepped softly into the room and went cautiously to the sofa. Raskolnikov heard Nastasia's whisper, "Don't disturb him. Let him sleep. He can have his dinner later." "Quite so," answered Razumihin. Both withdrew carefully and closed the door. Another half-hour passed. Raskolnikov opened his eyes, turned on his back again, clasping his hands behind his head. Who is he? Who is that man who sprang out of the earth? Where was he? What did he see? He has seen it all, that's clear. Where was he then, and from where did he see? Why has he only now sprung out of the earth? And how could he see? Is it possible? Continued Raskolnikov, turning cold and shivering. And the jewel-case Nikolai found behind the door. Was that possible? A clue? You miss an infinitesimal line and you can build it into a pyramid of evidence. A fly flew by and saw it. Is it possible? He felt with sudden loathing how weak, how physically weak he had become. I ought to have known it, he thought with a bitter smile. And how dared I, knowing myself, knowing how I should be, take up an axe and shed blood? I ought to have known beforehand. But I did know, he whispered in despair. At times he came to a standstill at some thought. No, those men are not made so. The real master to whom all is permitted storms Toulon, makes a massacre in Paris, forgets an army in Egypt, wastes 500,000 men in the Moscow expedition, and gets off with a jest at Vilna. And altars are set up to him after his death, and so all is permitted. No, such people, it seems, are not of flesh but of bronze. One sudden, irrelevant idea almost made him laugh. Napoleon, the pyramids, Waterloo, and a wretched, skinny old woman, a pawnbroker with a red trunk under her bed. It's a nice hash for Porfiry Petrovitch to digest. How can they digest it? It's too inartistic. And Napoleon creep under an old woman's bed. How loathsome. At moments he felt he was raving. He sank into a state of feverish excitement. The old woman is of no consequence, he thought, hotly and incoherently. The old woman was a mistake, perhaps, but she is not what matters. The old woman was only an illness. I was in a hurry to overstep. I didn't kill a human being, but a principle. I killed the principle, but I didn't overstep. I stopped on this side. I was only capable of killing, and it seems I wasn't even capable of that principle. Why was that fool Razumihin abusing the socialists? They are industrious, commercial people. The happiness of all is their case. No, life is only given to me once, and I shall never have it again. I don't want to wait for the happiness of all. I want to live myself, or else better not live at all. I simply couldn't pass by my mother starving, keeping my ruble in my pocket while I waited for the happiness of all. I am putting my little brick into the happiness of all, and so my heart is at peace. Ha ha, why have you let me slip? I only live once, I too want. I am an aesthetic louse and nothing more, he added suddenly, laughing like a madman. Yes, I am certainly a louse, he went on, clutching at the idea, gloating over it, and playing with it with vindictive pleasure. In the first place, because I can reason that I am one, and secondly, because for a month past I have been troubling benevolent Providence, calling it to witness that not for my own fleshly lusts did I undertake it, but with a grand and noble object. Ha ha! Thirdly, because I aimed at carrying it out as justly as possible, weighing, measuring, and calculating. Of all the lice, I picked out the most useless one, and proposed to take from her only as much as I needed for the first step, no more nor less. So the rest would have gone to a monastery, according to her will. Ha ha ha! And what shows that I am utterly a louse, he added, grinding his teeth, is that I am perhaps viler and more loathsome than the louse I killed, and I felt beforehand that I should tell myself so after killing her. Can anything be compared with the horror of that? The vulgarity, the abjectness. I understand the prophet with his sabre, on his steed, Allah commands, and trembling creation must obey. The prophet is right. He is right when he sets a battery across the street and blows up the innocent and the guilty without deigning to explain. It's for you to obey, trembling creation, and not to have desires, for that's not for you. I shall never, never forgive the old woman. His hair was soaked with sweat, his quivering lips were parched, his eyes were fixed on the ceiling. Mother, sister, how I loved them. Why do I hate them now? Yes, I hate them. I feel a physical hatred for them. I can't bear them near me. I went up to my mother and kissed her, I remember, to embrace her and think if she only knew, shall I tell her then? That's just what I might do. She must be the same as I am, he added, straining himself to think, as it were struggling with delirium. Ah, how I hate the old woman now. I feel I should kill her again if she came to life. Poor Lizaveta. Why did she come in? It's strange, though. Why is it I scarcely ever think of her, as though I hadn't killed her? Lizaveta, Sonia, poor gentle things with gentle eyes. Dear women, why don't they weep? Why don't they moan? They give up everything. Their eyes are soft and gentle. Sonia, 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 gentle Sonia. He lost consciousness. It seemed strange to him that he didn't remember how he got into the street. It was late evening. The twilight had fallen, and the full moon was shining more and more brightly, but there was a peculiar breathlessness in the air. There were crowds of people in the street. Workmen and business people were making their way home. Other people had come out for a walk. There was a smell of mortar, dust and stagnant water. Raskolnikov walked along, mournful and anxious. He was distinctly aware of having come out with a purpose, of having to do something in a hurry, but what it was he had forgotten. Suddenly he stood still and saw a man standing on the other side of the street, beckoning to him. He crossed over to him, but at once the man turned and walked away with his head hanging, as though he had made no sign to him. Stay, did he really beckon? Raskolnikov wondered, but he tried to overtake him. When he was within 10 paces, he recognized him and was frightened. It was the same man with stooping shoulders in the long coat. Raskolnikov followed him at a distance. His heart was beating. They went down a turning. The man still did not look round. Does he know I am following him? Thought Raskolnikov. The man went into the gateway of a big house. Raskolnikov hastened to the gate and looked in to see whether he would look round and sign to him. In the courtyard, the man did turn round and again seemed to beckon him. Raskolnikov at once followed him into the yard, but the man was gone. He must have gone up the first staircase. Raskolnikov rushed after him. He heard slow measured steps 2 flights above. The staircase seemed strangely familiar. He reached the window on the first floor. The moon shone through the panes with a melancholy and mysterious light. Then he reached the second floor. Bah! This is the flat where the painters were at work, but how was it he did not recognize it at once? The steps of the man above had died away, so he must have stopped or hidden somewhere. He reached the third story. Should he go on? There was a stillness that was dreadful, but he went on. The sound of his own footsteps scared and frightened him. How dark it was! The man must be hiding in some corner here. Ah! The flat was standing wide open. He hesitated and went in. It was very dark and empty in the passage, as though everything had been removed. He crept on tiptoe into the parlour, which was flooded with moonlight. Everything there was as before: the chairs, the looking-glass, the yellow sofa, and the pictures in the frames. A huge, round, copper-red moon looked in at the windows. It's the moon that makes it so still, weaving some mystery, thought Raskolnikov. He stood and waited a long while, and the more silent the moonlight, the more violently his heart beat, till it was painful. And still the same hush. Suddenly he heard a momentary sharp crack, like the snapping of a splinter, and all was still again. A fly flew up suddenly and struck the window pane with a plaintive buzz. At that moment he noticed in the corner between the window and the little cupboard something like a cloak hanging on the wall. Why is that cloak here? He thought. It wasn't there before. He went up to it quietly and felt that there was someone hiding behind it. He cautiously moved the cloak and saw, sitting on a chair in the corner, the old woman bent double so that he couldn't see her face, but it was she. He stood over her. She is afraid, he thought. He stealthily took the axe from the noose and struck her one blow, then another on the skull. But strange to say, she did not stir, as though she were made of wood. He was frightened, bent down nearer and tried to look at her, but she too bent her head lower. He bent right down to the ground and peeped up into her face from below. He peeped and turned cold with horror. The old woman was sitting and laughing, shaking with noiseless laughter, doing her utmost that he should not hear it. Suddenly he fancied that the door from the bedroom was opened a little, and that there was laughter and whispering within. He was overcome with frenzy, and he began hitting the old woman on the head with all his force. But at every blow of the axe the laughter and whispering from the bedroom grew louder, and the old woman was simply shaking with mirth. He was rushing away, but the passage was full of people. The doors of the flat stood open, and on the landing, on the stairs, and everywhere below there were people, rows of heads, all looking, but huddled together in silence and expectation. Something gripped his heart. His legs were rooted to the spot. They would not move. He tried to scream and woke up. He drew a deep breath. But his dream seemed strangely to persist. His door was flung open, and a man whom he had never seen stood in the doorway watching him intently. Raskolnikov had hardly opened his eyes, and he instantly closed them again. He lay on his back without stirring. Is it still a dream? He wondered, and again raised his eyelids hardly perceptibly. The stranger was standing in the same place, still watching him. He stepped cautiously into the room, carefully closing the door after him, went up to the table, paused a moment, still keeping his eyes on Raskolnikov, and noiselessly seated himself on the chair by the sofa. He put his hat on the floor beside him and leaned his hands on his cane and his chin on his hands. It was evident that he was prepared to wait indefinitely. As far as Raskolnikov could make out from his stolen glances, he was a man no longer young, stout, with a full, fair, almost whitish beard. 10 minutes passed. It was still light, but beginning to get dusk. There was complete stillness in the room. Not a sound came from the stairs. Only a big fly buzzed and fluttered against the window pane. It was unbearable at last. Raskolnikov suddenly got up and sat on the sofa. Come, tell me what you want. I knew you were not asleep, but only pretending, the stranger answered oddly, laughing calmly. Arkady Ivanovitch Svidrigailov, allow me to introduce myself. P.A. 4. Chapter 1. Can this be still a dream? Raskolnikov thought once more. He looked carefully and suspiciously at the unexpected visitor. "Svidrigailov, what nonsense! It can't be!" he said at last aloud in bewilderment. His visitor did not seem at all surprised at this exclamation. "I've come to you for 2 reasons. In the first place, I wanted to make your personal acquaintance, as I have already heard a great deal about you that is interesting and flattering. Secondly, I cherish the hope that you may not refuse to assist me in a matter directly concerning the welfare of your sister, Avdotya Romanovna. For without your support, she might not let me come near her now, for she is prejudiced against me, but with your assistance I reckon on—" "You reckon wrongly," interrupted Raskolnikov. "They only arrived yesterday, may I ask you?" Raskolnikov made no reply. "It was yesterday, I know. I only arrived myself the day before." "Well, let me tell you this, Rodion Romanovitch, I don't consider it necessary to justify myself, but kindly tell me what was there particularly criminal on my part in all this business, speaking without prejudice, with common sense?" Raskolnikov continued to look at him in silence. "That in my own house I persecuted a defenseless girl and insulted her with my infamous proposals. Is that it? I am anticipating you. But you've only to assume that I, too, am a man ec nihil humanum, in a word, that I am capable of being attracted and falling in love, which does not depend on our will, then everything can be explained in the most natural manner. The question is, am I a monster, or am I myself a victim? And what if I am a victim? In proposing to the object of my passion to elope with me to America or Switzerland, I may have cherished the deepest respect for her and may have thought that I was promoting our mutual happiness. Reason is the slave of passion, you know. Why, probably I was doing more harm to myself than anyone." "But that's not the point," Raskolnikov interrupted with disgust. "It's simply that whether you are right or wrong, we dislike you. We don't want to have anything to do with you. We show you the door. Go out." Svidrigailov broke into a sudden laugh. But there's no getting round you," he said, laughing in the frankest way. "I hope to get round you, but you took up the right line at once. But you are trying to get round me still." "What of it? What of it?" cried Svidrigailov, laughing openly. "But this is what the French call bonne guerre, and the most innocent form of deception." "But still you have interrupted me. One way or another, I repeat again, there would never have been any unpleasantness except for what happened in the garden. Marfa Petrovna—" "You have got rid of Marfa Petrovna too, so they say," Raskolnikov interrupted rudely. "Oh, you've heard that too, then? You'd be sure to, though. But as for your question, I really don't know what to say, though my own conscience is quite at rest on that score. Don't suppose that I am in any apprehension about it. All was regular and in order. The medical inquiry diagnosed apoplexy due to bathing immediately after a heavy dinner and a bottle of wine, and indeed, it could have proved nothing else. But I'll tell you what I have been thinking to myself of late, on my way here in the train, especially. Didn't I contribute to all that? Calamity, morally, in a way, by irritation or something of the sort. But I came to the conclusion that that too was quite out of the question." Raskolnikov laughed. "I wonder you trouble yourself about it. But what are you laughing at? Only consider, I struck her just twice with a switch. There were no marks even. Don't regard me as a cynic, please. I am perfectly aware how atrocious it was of me and all that. But I know for certain, too, that Marfa Petrovna was very likely pleased at my, so to say, warmth. The story of your sister had been wrung out to the last drop. For the last 3 days Marfa Petrovna had been forced to sit at home. She had nothing to show herself with in the town. Besides, she had bored them so with that letter. You heard about her reading the letter. And all of a sudden those 2 switches fell from heaven. Her first act was to order the carriage to be got out. Not to speak of the fact that there are cases when women are very, very glad to be insulted in spite of all their show of indignation. There are instances of it with everyone. Human beings in general, indeed, greatly love to be insulted. Have you noticed that? But it's particularly so with women. One might even say it's their only amusement. At one time, Raskolnikov thought of getting up and walking out and so finishing the interview. But some curiosity and even a sort of prudence made him linger for a moment. "You are fond of fighting?" he asked carelessly. "No. Not very, Svidrigailov answered calmly. And Marfa Petrovna and I scarcely ever fought. We lived very harmoniously, and she was always pleased with me. I only used the whip twice in all our 7 years, not counting a third occasion of a very ambiguous character. The first time, 2 months after our marriage, immediately after we arrived in the country, and the last time was that of which we are speaking. Did you suppose I was such a monster, such a reactionary, such a slave driver? Ha ha, by the way, do you remember, Rodion Romanovitch, how a few years ago, in those days of beneficent publicity, a nobleman, I've forgotten his name, was put to shame everywhere, in all the papers, for having thrashed a German woman in the railway train? You remember? It was in those days, that very year, I believe, the disgraceful action of the age took place, you know, the Egyptian Nights. That public reading, you remember? The dark eyes, you know. Ah, the golden days of our youth, where are they? Well, as for the gentleman who thrashed the German, I feel no sympathy with him, because after all, what need is there for sympathy? But I must say that there are sometimes such provoking Germans that I don't believe there is a progressive who could quite answer for himself. No one looked at the subject from that point of view then. But that's the truly humane point of view, I assure you. After saying this, Svidrigailov broke into a sudden laugh again. Raskolnikov saw clearly that this was a man with a firm purpose in his mind and able to keep it to himself. "I expect you've not talked to anyone for some days?" he asked. "Scarcely anyone." "I suppose you are wondering at my being such an adaptable man?" "No, I am only wondering at your being too adaptable a man." "Because I am not offended at the rudeness of your questions. Is that it? But why take offence?" "As you asked, so I answered," he replied, with a surprising expression of simplicity. "You know, there's hardly anything I take interest in," he went on, as it were dreamily, "especially now. I've nothing to do. You are quite at liberty to imagine, though, that I am making up to you with a motive, particularly as I told you I want to see your sister about something. But I'll confess frankly, I am very much bored. The last 3 days especially, so I am delighted to see you. Don't be angry, Rodion Romanovitch, but you seem to be somehow awfully strange yourself. Say what you like. There's something wrong with you. And now, too, not this very minute, I mean, but now, generally." Well, I won't, don't scowl. I am not such a bear, you know, as you think." Raskolnikov looked gloomily at him. "You are not a bear, perhaps, at all," he said. "I fancy indeed that you are a man of very good breeding, or at least know how on occasion to behave like one." "I am not particularly interested in anyone's opinion," Svidrigailov answered, dryly, and even with a shade of haughtiness. "And therefore why not be vulgar at times when vulgarity is such a convenient cloak for our climate? And especially if one has a natural propensity that way," he added, laughing again. "But I've heard you have many friends here. You are, as they say, not without connections. What can you want with me, then, unless you've some special object?" "That's true that I have friends here," Svidrigailov admitted, not replying to the chief point. "I've met some already. I've been lounging about for the last 3 days, and I've seen them, or they've seen me. That's a matter of course. I am well dressed and reckon not a poor man. The emancipation of the serfs hasn't affected me. My property consists chiefly of forests and water meadows. The revenue has not fallen off, but I am not going to see them. I was sick of them long ago. I've been here 3 days and have called on no one. What a town it is! How has it come into existence among us? Tell me that. A town of officials and students of all sorts. Yes, there's a great deal I didn't notice when I was here 8 years ago, kicking up my heels. My only hope now is in anatomy. By Jove, it is." "Anatomy? But as for these clubs, Dassaults, parades or progress, indeed, maybe, well, all that can go on without me," he went on, again without noticing the question. "Besides, who wants to be a card sharper? Why, have you been a card sharper then?" "How could I help being? There was a regular set of us, men of the best society. 8 years ago we had a fine time. And all men of breeding, you know, poets, men of property. And indeed, as a rule in our Russian society, the best manners are found among those who've been thrashed. Have you noticed that?" I've deteriorated in the country, but I did get into prison for debt, through a low Greek who came from the inn. Then Marfa Petrovna turned up. She bargained with him and bought me off for 30,000 silver pieces. I owed 70,000. We were united in lawful wedlock, and she bore me off into the country like a treasure. You know she was 5 years older than I. She was very fond of me. For 7 years I never left the country. And, take note, that all my life she held a document over me, the IOU for 30,000 rubles, so if I were to elect to be restive about anything I should be trapped at once. And she would have done it. Women find nothing incompatible in that. If it hadn't been for that, would you have given her the slip? I don't know what to say. It was scarcely the document restrained me. I didn't want to go anywhere else. Marfa Petrovna herself invited me to go abroad, seeing I was bored, but I've been abroad before and always felt sick there. For no reason, but the sunrise, the Bay of Naples, the sea. You look at them and it makes you sad. What's most revolting is that one is really sad. No, it's better at home. Here at least one blames others for everything and excuses oneself. I should have gone perhaps on an expedition to the North Pole, because j'ai le vin mauvais and hate drinking, and there's nothing left but wine. I have tried it, but I say I've been told Berg is going up in a great balloon next Sunday from the Yusupov garden and will take up passengers at a fee. Is it true? Why would you go up? I know, oh no, muttered Svidrigailov, really seeming to be deep in thought. What does he mean? Is he in earnest? Raskolnikov wondered. No, the document didn't restrain me, Svidrigailov went on, meditatively. It was my own doing, not leaving the country, and nearly a year ago Marfa Petrovna gave me back the document on my name, and made me a present of a considerable sum of money, too. She had a fortune, you know. You see how I trust you, Arkady Ivanovitch. That was actually her expression. You don't believe she used it. But do you know I managed the estate quite decently? They know me in the neighbourhood. I ordered books, too. Marfa Petrovna at first approved, but afterwards she was afraid of my overstudying. You seem to be missing Marfa Petrovna very much. Missing her, perhaps? Really, perhaps I am. And, by the way, do you believe in ghosts? What ghosts? Why, ordinary ghosts. Do you believe in them? Perhaps not. Pour vous plaire, I wouldn't say no exactly. Do you see them, then? Svidrigailov looked at him rather oddly. Marfa Petrovna is pleased to visit me, he said, twisting his mouth into a strange smile. How do you mean she is pleased to visit you? She has been 3 times. I saw her first on the very day of the funeral, an hour after she was buried. It was the day before I left to come here. The second time was the day before yesterday, at daybreak, on the journey at the station of Malaya Vishera, and the third time was 2 hours ago in the room where I am staying. I was alone. Were you awake? Quite awake. Quite awake. I was wide awake every time. She comes, speaks to me for a minute, and goes out at the door. Always at the door. I can almost hear her. What made me think that something of the sort must be happening to you? Raskolnikov said suddenly. At the same moment he was surprised at having said it. He was much excited. What? Did you think so? Svidrigailov asked in astonishment. Did you really? Didn't I say that there was something in common between us, eh? You never said so, Raskolnikov cried sharply and with heat. Didn't I? No. I thought I did. When I came in and saw you lying with your eyes shut, pretending, I said to myself at once, here's the man. What do you mean by the man? What are you talking about? Cried Raskolnikov. What do I mean? I really don't know. Svidrigailov muttered ingenuously, as though he too were puzzled. For a minute they were silent. They stared in each other's faces. That's all nonsense, Raskolnikov shouted with vexation. What does she say when she comes to you? She? Would you believe it? She talks of the silliest trifles and... Man is a strange creature. It makes me angry. The first time she came in, I was tired, you know. The funeral service, the funeral ceremony, the lunch afterwards. At last I was left alone in my study. I lighted a cigar and began to think. She came in at the door. You've been so busy today, Arkady Ivanovitch, you have forgotten to wind the dining-room clock, she said. All those 7 years I've wound that clock every week, and if I forgot it, she would always remind me. The next day I set off on my way here. I got out at the station at daybreak. I'd been asleep, tired out, with my eyes half open. I was drinking some coffee. I looked up and there was suddenly Marfa Petrovna sitting beside me with a pack of cards in her hands. "Shall I tell your fortune for the journey, Arkady Ivanovitch?" She was a great hand at telling fortunes. I shall never forgive myself for not asking her to. I ran away in a fright, and besides, the bell rang. I was sitting today, feeling very heavy after a miserable dinner from a cook shop. I was sitting smoking, all of a sudden Marfa Petrovna again. She came in very smart in a new green silk dress with a long train. "Good day, Arkady Ivanovitch. How do you like my dress?" "Aniska can't make like this." Aniska was a dressmaker in the country, one of our former serf girls who had been trained in Moscow, a pretty wench. She stood turning round before me. I looked at the dress and then I looked carefully, very carefully, at her face. "I wonder you trouble to come to me about such trifles, Marfa Petrovna. Good gracious, you won't let one disturb you about anything." To tease her, I said, "I want to get married, Marfa Petrovna." "That's just like you, Arkady Ivanovitch. It does you very little credit to come looking for a bride when you've hardly buried your wife. And if you could make a good choice, at least, but I know it won't be for your happiness or hers, you will only be a laughing-stock to all good people." Then she went out, and her train seemed to rustle. "Isn't it nonsense, eh?" "But perhaps you are telling lies," Raskolnikov put in. "I rarely lie," answered Svidrigaïlov thoughtfully, apparently not noticing the rudeness of the question. "And in the past, have you ever seen ghosts before?" Yes, I have seen them, but only once in my life 6 years ago. I had a serf, Filka. Just after his burial, I called out forgetting, 'Filka, my pipe.' He came in and went to the cupboard where my pipes were. I sat still and thought he is doing it out of revenge, because we had a violent quarrel just before his death. 'How dare you come in with a hole in your elbow?' I said. 'Go away, you scamp.' He turned and went out and never came again. I didn't tell Marfa Petrovna at the time. I wanted to have a service sung for him, but I was ashamed. You should go to a doctor. I know I am not well, without your telling me, though I don't know what's wrong. I believe I am 5 times as strong as you are. I didn't ask you whether you believe that ghosts are seen, but whether you believe that they exist." "No, I won't believe it," Raskolnikov cried with positive anger. "What do people generally say?" muttered Svidrigaïlov, as though speaking to himself, looking aside and bowing his head. "They say, 'You are ill, so what appears to you is only unreal fantasy.' But that's not strictly logical. I agree that ghosts only appear to the sick, but that only proves that they are unable to appear except to the sick, not that they don't exist." "Nothing of the sort," Raskolnikov insisted irritably. "No, you don't think so?" Svidrigaïlov went on, looking at him deliberately. "But what do you say to this argument? Help me with it. Ghosts are, as it were, shreds and fragments of other worlds, the beginning of them. A man in health has, of course, no reason to see them, because he is above all a man of this earth, and is bound for the sake of completeness and order to live only in this life. But as soon as one is ill, as soon as the normal earthly order of the organism is broken, one begins to realize the possibility of another world. And the more seriously ill one is, the closer becomes one's contact with that other world, so that as soon as the man dies, he steps straight into that world. I thought of that long ago. If you believe in a future life, you could believe in that too." "I don't believe in a future life," said Raskolnikov. Svidrigaïlov sat lost in thought. "And what if there are only spiders there, or something of that sort?" he said suddenly. "He is a madman," thought Raskolnikov. "We always imagine eternity as something beyond our conception, something vast, vast. But why must it be vast? Instead of all that, what if it's one little room, like a bathhouse in the country, black and grimy and spiders in every corner, and that's all eternity is? I sometimes fancy it like that. Can it be you? Can imagine nothing juster and more comforting than that?" Raskolnikov cried with a feeling of anguish. "Juster? And how can we tell? Perhaps that is just. And do you know it's what I would certainly have made it?" answered Svidrigaïlov with a vague smile. This horrible answer sent a cold chill through Raskolnikov. Svidrigaïlov raised his head, looked at him, and suddenly began laughing. "Only think," he cried, "half an hour ago we had never seen each other. We regarded each other as enemies. There is a matter unsettled between us. We've thrown it aside, and away we'd gone into the abstract. Wasn't I right in saying that we were birds of a feather? Kindly allow me," Raskolnikov went on irritably, "to ask you to explain why you have honoured me with your visit, and I am in a hurry. I have no time to waste. I want to go out." "By all means, by all means. Your sister, Avdotia Romanovna, is going to be married to Mr. Luzin, Pyotr Petrovitch. Can you refrain from any question about my sister and from mentioning her name? I can't understand how you dare utter her name in my presence if you really are Svidrigaïlov." "Why? But I've come here to speak about her. How can I avoid mentioning her?" "Very good, speak, but make haste." "I am sure that you must have formed your own opinion of this Mr. Luzin, who is a connection of mine through my wife, if you have only seen him for half an hour or heard any facts about him. He is no match for Avdotia Romanovna. I believe Avdotia Romanovna is sacrificing herself generously and imprudently for the sake of her family. I fancied from all I had heard of you that you would be very glad if the match could be broken off without the sacrifice of worldly advantages. Now I know you personally, I am convinced of it." "All this is very naive. Excuse me, I should have said impudent on your part," said Raskolnikov. "You mean to say that I am seeking my own ends?" "Don't be uneasy, Rodion Romanovitch. If I were working for my own advantage, I would not have spoken out so directly. I am not quite a fool. I will confess something psychologically curious about that. Just now, defending my love for Avdotia Romanovna, I said I was myself the victim. Well, let me tell you that I've no feeling of love now, not the slightest, so that I wonder myself indeed, for I really did feel something. Through idleness and depravity," Raskolnikov put in. "I certainly am idle and depraved, but your sister has such qualities that even I could not help being impressed by them. But that's all nonsense, as I see myself now." "Have you seen that long?" "I began to be aware of it before, but was only perfectly sure of it the day before yesterday, almost at the moment I arrived in Petersburg. I still fancied in Moscow, though, that I was coming to try to get Avdotia Romanovna's hand and to cut out Mr. Luzin." "Excuse me for interrupting you. Kindly be brief, and come to the object of your visit. I am in a hurry. I want to go out." "With the greatest pleasure. On arriving here and determining on a certain journey, I should like to make some necessary preliminary arrangements. I left my children with an aunt. They are well provided for, and they have no need of me personally. And a nice father I should make, too. I have taken nothing but what Marfa Petrovna gave me a year ago. That's enough for me. Excuse me, I am just coming to the point. Before the journey which may come off, I want to settle Mr. Luzin, too. It's not that I detest him so much, but it was through him I quarrelled with Marfa Petrovna when I learned that she had dished up this marriage. I want now to see Avdotia Romanovna through your mediation, and if you like in your presence, to explain to her that in the first place she will never gain anything but harm from Mr. Luzin. Then, begging her pardon for all past unpleasantness, to make her a present of 10,000 roubles and so assist the rupture with Mr. Luzin, a rupture to which I believe she is herself not disinclined if she could see the way to it." "You are certainly mad," cried Raskolnikov, not so much angered as astonished. "How dare you talk like that? I knew you would scream at me, but in the first place, though I am not rich, this 10,000 roubles is perfectly free. I have absolutely no need for it. If Avdotia Romanovna does not accept it, I shall waste it in some more foolish way. That's the first thing. Secondly, my conscience is perfectly easy. I make the offer with no ulterior motive. You may not believe it, but in the end, Avdotia Romanovna, and you will know. The point is that I did actually cause your sister, whom I greatly respect, some trouble and unpleasantness, and so, sincerely regretting it, I want— Not to compensate, not to repay her for the unpleasantness, but simply to do something to her advantage, to show that I am not, after all, privileged to do nothing but harm. If there were a millionth fraction of self-interest in my offer, I should not have made it so openly, and I should not have offered her 10,000 only, when 5 weeks ago I offered her more. Besides, I may, perhaps, very soon marry a young lady, and that alone ought to prevent suspicion of any design on Avdotia Romanovna. In conclusion, let me say that in marrying Mr. Luzin, she is taking money just the same, only from another man. Don't be angry, Rodion Romanovich, think it over coolly and quietly. Svidrigailov himself was exceedingly cool and quiet as he was saying this. I beg you to say no more, said Raskolnikov. In any case, this is unpardonable impertinence. Not in the least. Then a man may do nothing but harm to his neighbour in this world, and is prevented from doing the tiniest bit of good by trivial conventional formalities. That's absurd. If I died, for instance, and left that sum to your sister in my will, surely she wouldn't refuse it. Very likely she would. Oh, no, indeed. However, if you refuse it, so be it, though 10,000 roubles is a capital thing to have on occasion. In any case, I beg you to repeat what I have said to Avdotia Romanovna. No, I won't. In that case, Rodion Romanovich, I shall be obliged to try and see her myself and worry her by doing so. And if I do tell her, will you not try to see her? I don't know really what to say. I should like very much to see her once more. Don't hope for it. I'm sorry, but you don't know me. Perhaps we may become better friends. You think we may become friends? And why not? Svidrigailov said, smiling. He stood up and took his hat. I didn't quite intend to disturb you, and I came here without reckoning on it, though I was very much struck by your face this morning. Where did you see me this morning? Raskolnikov asked uneasily. I saw you by chance. I kept fancying there is something about you like me, but don't be uneasy. I am not intrusive. I used to get on all right with card sharpers, and I never bored Prince Sverby, a great personage who was a distant relation of mine, and I could write about Raphael's Madonna in Madame Prolukhov's album, and I never left Marfa Petrovna's side for 7 years, and I used to stay the night at Vyasemsky's house in the Haymarket in the old days, and I may go up in a balloon with Berg, perhaps. Oh, all right. Are you starting soon on your travels, may I ask? What travels? Why, on that journey, you spoke of it yourself. A journey? Oh, yes, I did speak of a journey. Well, that's a wide subject. If only you knew what you were asking, he added, and gave a sudden, loud, short laugh. Perhaps I'll get married instead of the journey. They're making a match for me. Here. Yes. How have you had time for that? But I am very anxious to see Avdotia Romanovna once. I earnestly beg it. Well, goodbye for the present. Oh, yes, I have forgotten something. Tell your sister, Rodion Romanovich, that Marfa Petrovna remembered her in her will and left her 3,000 roubles. That's absolutely certain. Marfa Petrovna arranged it a week before her death, and it was done in my presence. Avdotia Romanovna will be able to receive the money in 2 or 3 weeks. Are you telling the truth? Yes, tell her. Well, your servant. I am staying very near you. As he went out, Svidrigailov ran up against Razumihin in the doorway. Chapter 2. It was nearly 8 o'clock. The 2 young men hurried to Bakalaev's to arrive before Luzin. Why, who was that? Asked Razumihin as soon as they were in the street. It was Svidrigailov, that landowner in whose house my sister was insulted when she was their governess. Through his persecuting her with his attentions, she was turned out by his wife, Marfa Petrovna. This Marfa Petrovna begged Dunia's forgiveness afterwards, and she's just died suddenly. It was of her we were talking this morning. I don't know why I'm afraid of that man. He came here at once after his wife's funeral. He is very strange and is determined on doing something. We must guard Dunya from him. That's what I wanted to tell you, do you hear? Guard her. What can he do to harm Avdotia Romanovna? Thank you, Rodia, for speaking to me like that. We will guard her. Where does he live? I don't know. Why didn't you ask? What a pity. I'll find out, though. Did you see him? asked Raskolnikov after a pause. Yes, I noticed him. I noticed him well. You did really see him? You saw him clearly? Raskolnikov insisted. Yes, I remember him perfectly. I should know him in 1,000. I have a good memory for faces. They were silent again. That's all right, muttered Raskolnikov. Do you know, I fancied, I keep thinking that it may have been an hallucination. What do you mean? I don't understand you. Well, you all say, Raskolnikov went on, twisting his mouth into a smile, that I am mad. I thought just now that perhaps I really am mad and have only seen a phantom. What do you mean? Why, who can tell? Perhaps I am really mad, and perhaps everything that happened all these days may be only imagination. Ah, Rodya, you've been upset again. But what did he say? What did he come for? Raskolnikov did not answer. Razumihin thought a minute. Now let me tell you my story, he began. I came to you, you were asleep. Then we had dinner, and then I went to Porfiry's. Zametov was still with him. I tried to begin, but it was no use. I couldn't speak in the right way. They don't seem to understand and can't understand, but are not a bit ashamed. I drew Porfiry to the window and began talking to him, but it was still no use. He looked away and I looked away. At last I shook my fist in his ugly face and told him as a cousin I'd brain him. He merely looked at me, I cursed and came away. That was all. It was very stupid. To Zametov I didn't say a word, but you see, I thought I'd made a mess of it. But as I went downstairs a brilliant idea struck me. Why should we trouble? Of course, if you were in any danger or anything, but why need you care? You needn't care a hang for them. We shall have a laugh at them afterwards, and if I were in your place I'd mystify them more than ever. How ashamed they'll be afterwards. Hang them. We can thrash them afterwards, but let's laugh at them now. To be sure, answered Raskolnikov. But what will you say tomorrow? He thought to himself. Strange to say, till that moment it had never occurred to him to wonder what Razumihin would think when he knew. As he thought it, Raskolnikov looked at him. Razumihin's account of his visit to Porfiry had very little interest for him. So much had come and gone since then. In the corridor they came upon Luzin. He had arrived punctually at 8 and was looking for the number, so that all three went in together without greeting or looking at one another. The young men walked in first, while Pyotr Petrovitch, for good manners, lingered a little in the passage, taking off his coat. Pulcheria Alexandrovna came forward at once to greet him in the doorway. Dunya was welcoming her brother. Pyotr Petrovitch walked in and quite amiably, though with redoubled dignity, bowed to the ladies. He looked, however, as though he were a little put out and could not yet recover himself. Pulcheria Alexandrovna, who seemed also a little embarrassed, hastened to make them all sit down at the round table where a samovar was boiling. Dunya and Luzin were facing one another on opposite sides of the table. Razumihin and Raskolnikov were facing Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Razumihin was next to Luzin, and Raskolnikov was beside his sister. A moment's silence followed. Pyotr Petrovitch deliberately drew out a cambric handkerchief reeking of scent and blew his nose with an air of a benevolent man who felt himself slighted and was firmly resolved to insist on an explanation. In the passage the idea had occurred to him to keep on his overcoat and walk away, and so give the two ladies a sharp and emphatic lesson and make them feel the gravity of the position. But he could not bring himself to do this. Besides, he could not endure uncertainty, and he wanted an explanation. If his request had been so openly disobeyed, there was something behind it, and in that case it was better to find it out beforehand. It rested with him to punish them, and there would always be time for that. "I trust you had a favourable journey?" he inquired officially of Pulcheria Alexandrovna. "Oh, very, Pyotr Petrovitch. I am gratified to hear it, and Avdotia Romanovna is not over-fatigued either." "I am young and strong, I don't get tired, but it was a great strain for Mother," answered Dunya. "That's unavoidable. Our national railways are of terrible length. Mother Russia, as they say, is a vast country. In spite of all my desire to do so, I was unable to meet you yesterday. But I trust all passed off without inconvenience." "Oh no, Pyotr Petrovitch, it was all terribly disheartening," Pulcheria Alexandrovna hastened to declare with peculiar intonation. And if Dmitri Prokofitch had not been sent us, I really believe by God himself we should have been utterly lost." "Here he is, Dmitri Prokofitch Razumihin," she added, introducing him to Luzin. "I had the pleasure yesterday," muttered Pyotr Petrovitch with a hostile glance sidelong at Razumihin. Then he scowled and was silent. Pyotr Petrovitch belonged to that class of persons, on the surface very polite in society, who make a great point of punctiliousness, but who, directly they are crossed in anything, are completely disconcerted, and become more like sacks of flour than elegant and lively men of society. Again, all was silent. Raskolnikov was obstinately mute. Avdotia Romanovna was unwilling to open the conversation too soon. Razumihin had nothing to say, so Pulcheria Alexandrovna was anxious again. "Marfa Petrovna is dead, have you heard?" She began, having recourse to her leading item of conversation. "To be sure, I heard so. I was immediately informed, and I have come to make you acquainted with the fact that Arkady Ivanovitch Svidrigaïlov set off in haste for Petersburg immediately after his wife's funeral. So at least I have excellent authority for believing." "To Petersburg? Here?" Dunya asked in alarm and looked at her mother. "Yes, indeed, and doubtless not without some design, having in view the rapidity of his departure and all the circumstances preceding it." "Good heavens, won't he leave Dunya in peace even here?" cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. "I imagine that neither you nor Avdotia Romanovna have any grounds for uneasiness, unless, of course, you are yourselves desirous of getting into communication with him. For my part, one am on my guard, and am now discovering where he is lodging." "Oh, Pyotr Petrovitch, you would not believe what a fright you have given me," Pulcheria Alexandrovna went on. "I've only seen him twice, but I thought him terrible, terrible. I am convinced that he was the cause of Marfa Petrovna's death. It's impossible to be certain about that. I have precise information. I do not dispute that he may have contributed to accelerate the course of events by the moral influence, so to say, of the affront. But as to the general conduct and moral characteristics of that personage, I am in agreement with you. I do not know whether he is well off now, and precisely what Marfa Petrovna left him. This will be known to me within a very short period, but no doubt here in Petersburg, if he has any pecuniary resources, he will relapse at once into his old ways. He is the most depraved and abjectly vicious specimen of that class of men. I have considerable reason to believe that Marfa Petrovna, who was so unfortunate as to fall in love with him and to pay his debts 8 years ago, was of service to him also in another way. Solely by her exertions and sacrifices, a criminal charge, involving an element of fantastic and homicidal brutality, for which he might well have been sentenced to Siberia, was hushed up. That's the sort of man he is, if you care to know." "Good heavens!" cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Raskolnikov listened attentively. "Are you speaking the truth when you say that you have good evidence of this?" Dunya asked sternly and emphatically. "I only repeat what I was told in secret by Marfa Petrovna. I must observe that from the legal point of view the case was far from clear. There was, and I believe still is, living here a woman called Reslik, a foreigner, who lent small sums of money at interest, and did other commissions, and with this woman Svidrigaïlov had for a long while close and mysterious relations. She had a relation, a niece I believe, living with her, a deaf and dumb girl of 15, or perhaps not more than 14. Reslik hated this girl and grudged her every crust. She used to beat her mercilessly. One day the girl was found hanging in the garret. At the inquest the verdict was suicide. After the usual proceedings the matter ended, but, later on, information was given that the child had been cruelly outraged by Svidrigaïlov. It is true, this was not clearly established. The information was given by another German woman of loose character, whose word could not be trusted. No statement was actually made to the police. Thanks to Marfa Petrovna's money and exertions, it did not get beyond gossip. And yet the story is a very significant one. You heard, no doubt, Avdotia Romanovna, when you were with them, the story of the servant Philip who died of ill treatment he received 6 years ago, before the abolition of serfdom. I heard, on the contrary, that this Philip hanged himself. Quite so, But what drove him, or rather perhaps disposed him, to suicide was the systematic persecution and severity of Mr. Svidrigailov. I don't know that, answered Dunya dryly. I only heard a queer story that Philip was a sort of hypochondriac, a sort of domestic philosopher. The servants used to say he read himself silly, and that he hanged himself partly on account of Mr. Svidrigailov's mockery of him and not his blows. When I was there he behaved well to the servants, and they were actually fond of him, though they certainly did blame him for Philip's death. I perceive, Avdotya Romanovna, that you seem disposed to undertake his defence all of a sudden, Luzin observed, twisting his lips into an ambiguous smile. There's no doubt that he is an astute man, and insinuating where ladies are concerned, of which Marfa Petrovna, who has died so strangely, is a terrible instance. My only desire has been to be of service to you and your mother with my advice, in view of the renewed efforts which may certainly be anticipated from him. For my part, it's my firm conviction that he will end in a debtor's prison again. Marfa Petrovna had not the slightest intention of settling anything substantial on him, having regard for his children's interests, and, if she left him anything, it would only be the merest sufficiency, something insignificant and ephemeral which would not last a year for a man of his habits. Pyotr Petrovitch, I beg you, said Dunya, say no more of Mr. Svidrigailov. It makes me miserable. He has just been to see me, said Raskolnikov, breaking his silence for the first time. There were exclamations from all, and they all turned to him. Even Pyotr Petrovitch was roused. An hour and a half ago, he came in when I was asleep, waked me, and introduced himself, Raskolnikov continued. He was fairly cheerful and at ease, and quite hopes that we shall become friends. He is particularly anxious, by the way, Dunya, for an interview with you, at which he asked me to assist. He has a proposition to make to you, and he told me about it. He told me, too, that a week before her death, Marfa Petrovna left you 3,000 roubles in her will, Dunya, and that you can receive the money very shortly. Thank God, cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna, crossing herself. Pray for her soul, Dunya. It's a fact, broke from Luzin. Tell us. What more? Dunya urged Raskolnikov. Then he said that he wasn't rich, and all the estate was left to his children who are now with an aunt, then that he was staying somewhere not far from me, but where, I don't know, I didn't ask. But what? What does he want to propose to Dunya? Cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna in a fright. Did he tell you? Yes. What was it? I'll tell you afterwards. Raskolnikov ceased speaking and turned his attention to his tea. Pyotr Petrovitch looked at his watch. I am compelled to keep a business engagement, and so I shall not be in your way, he added, with an air of some pique, and he began getting up. Don't go, Pyotr Petrovitch, said Dunya. You intended to spend the evening. Besides, you wrote yourself that you wanted to have an explanation with Mother. Precisely so, Avdotya Romanovna, Pyotr Petrovitch answered impressively, sitting down again, but still holding his hat. I certainly desired an explanation with you and your honoured mother upon a very important point indeed. But as your brother cannot speak openly in my presence of some proposals of Mr. Svidrigailov, I, too, do not desire and am not able to speak openly, in the presence of others, of certain matters of the greatest gravity. Moreover, my most weighty and urgent request has been disregarded. Assuming an aggrieved air, Luzin relapsed into dignified silence. Your request that my brother should not be present at our meeting was disregarded solely at my insistence, said Dunya. You wrote that you had been insulted by my brother. I think that this must be explained at once, and you must be reconciled, and if Rodya really has insulted you, then he should and will apologize. Pyotr Petrovitch took a stronger line. There are insults, Avdotya Romanovna, which no good will can make us forget. There is a line in everything which it is dangerous to overstep, and when it has been overstepped, there is no return. That wasn't what I was speaking of exactly, Pyotr Petrovitch, Dunya interrupted with some impatience. Please understand that our whole future depends now on whether all this is explained and set right as soon as possible. I tell you frankly at the start that I cannot look at it in any other light, and if you have the least regard for me, all this business must be ended today, however hard that may be. I repeat that if my brother is to blame, he will ask your forgiveness. I am surprised at your putting the question like that, said Luzin, getting more and more irritated. Esteeming, and so to say, adoring you, I may at the same time, very well indeed, be able to dislike some member of your family. Though I lay claim to the happiness of your hand, I cannot accept duties incompatible with. Ah, don't be so ready to take offence, Pyotr Petrovitch, Dunya interrupted with feeling, and be the sensible and generous man I have always considered, and wish to consider, you to be. I've given you a great promise. I am your betrothed. Trust me in this matter, and believe me, I shall be capable of judging impartially. My assuming the part of judge is as much a surprise for my brother as for you. When I insisted on his coming to our interview today after your letter, I told him nothing of what I meant to do. Understand that, if you are not reconciled, I must choose between you. It must be either you or he. That is how the question rests on your side and on his. I don't want to be mistaken in my choice, and I must not be. For your sake I must break off with my brother, for my brother's sake I must break off with you. I can find out for certain now whether he is a brother to me, and I want to know it, and of you, whether I am dear to you, whether you esteem me, whether you are the husband for me. Avdotia Romanovna, Luzin declared huffily, your words are of too much consequence to me. I will say more. They are offensive in view of the position I have the honour to occupy in relation to you. To say nothing of your strange and offensive setting me on a level with an impertinent boy, you admit the possibility of breaking your promise to me. You say you or he, showing thereby of how little consequence I am in your eyes. I cannot let this pass considering the relationship and the obligations existing between us. What? Cried Dunya, flushing. I set your interest beside all that has hitherto been most precious in my life, what has made up the whole of my life, and here you are offended at my making too little account of you. Raskolnikov smiled sarcastically. Razumihin fidgeted. But Pyotr Petrovitch did not accept the reproof. On the contrary, at every word he became more persistent and irritable, as though he relished it. Love for the future partner of your life, for your husband, ought to outweigh your love for your brother, he pronounced sententiously. And in any case, I cannot be put on the same level. Although I said so emphatically that I would not speak openly in your brother's presence, nevertheless, I intend now to ask your honoured mother for a necessary explanation on a point of great importance closely affecting my dignity. Your son, he turned to Pulcheria Alexandrovna, yesterday in the presence of Mr. Razsudkin, or I think that's it? Excuse me, I have forgotten your surname. He bowed politely to Razumihin. Insulted me by misrepresenting the idea I expressed to you in a private conversation, drinking coffee, that is, that marriage with a poor girl who has had experience of trouble is more advantageous from the conjugal point of view than with one who has lived in luxury, since it is more profitable for the moral character. Your son intentionally exaggerated the significance of my words and made them ridiculous, accusing me of malicious intentions, and, as far as I could see, relied upon your correspondence with him. I shall consider myself happy, Pulcheria Alexandrovna, if it is possible for you to convince me of an opposite conclusion, and thereby considerately reassure me. Kindly let me know in what terms precisely you repeated my words in your letter to Rodion Romanovitch. I don't remember, faltered Pulcheria Alexandrovna. I repeated them as I understood them. I don't know how Rodia repeated them to you. Perhaps he exaggerated them. He could not have exaggerated them, except at your instigation. Pyotr Petrovitch, Pulcheria Alexandrovna declared with dignity, the proof that Dunya and I did not take your words in a very bad sense is the fact that we are here. Good, mother, said Dunya approvingly. Then this is my fault again, said Luzin, aggrieved. Well, Pyotr Petrovitch, you keep blaming Rodion, but you yourself have just written what was false about him. Pulcheria Alexandrovna added, gaining courage. I don't remember writing anything false. You wrote, Raskolnikov said sharply, not turning to Luzin, that I gave money yesterday not to the widow of the man who was killed, as was the fact, but to his daughter, whom I had never seen till yesterday. You wrote this to make dissension between me and my family, and for that object added coarse expressions about the conduct of a girl whom you don't know. All that is mean slander. "Excuse me, sir," said Luzin, quivering with fury. "I enlarged upon your qualities and conduct in my letter solely in response to your sister's and mother's inquiries how I found you and what impression you made on me. As for what you've alluded to in my letter, be so good as to point out one word of falsehood. Show, that is, that you didn't throw away your money, and that there are not worthless persons in that family, however unfortunate. To my thinking, you, with all your virtues, are not worth the little finger of that unfortunate girl at whom you throw stones. Would you go so far, then, as to let her associate with your mother and sister? I have done so already, if you care to know. I made her sit down today with mother and Dunya." "Rodya!" cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Dunya crimsoned, Razumihin knitted his brows. Luzin smiled with lofty sarcasm. "You may see for yourself, Avdotia Romanovna," he said, "whether it is possible for us to agree. I hope now that this question is at an end, once and for all. I will withdraw, that I may not hinder the pleasures of family intimacy and the discussion of secrets." He got up from his chair and took his hat. "But in withdrawing, I venture to request that, for the future, I may be spared similar meetings and, so to say, compromises. I appeal particularly to you, honoured Pulcheria Alexandrovna, on this subject, the more as my letter was addressed to you and to no one else." Pulcheria Alexandrovna was a little offended. "You seem to think we are completely under your authority, Pyotr Petrovitch. Dunya has told you the reason your desire was disregarded. She had the best intentions, and indeed you write as though you were laying commands upon me. Are we to consider every desire of yours as a command? Let me tell you, on the contrary, that you ought to show particular delicacy and consideration for us now, because we have thrown up everything and have come here relying on you, and so we are in any case, in a sense, in your hands." "That is not quite true, Pulcheria Alexandrovna, especially at the present moment, when the news has come of Marfa Petrovna's legacy, which seems indeed very apropos, judging from the new tone you take to me," he added sarcastically. "Judging from that remark, we may certainly presume that you were reckoning on our helplessness," Dunya observed irritably. "But now, in any case, I cannot reckon on it, and I particularly desire not to hinder your discussion of the secret proposals of Arkady Ivanovitch Svidrigaïlov, which he has entrusted to your brother, and which have, I perceive, a great and possibly a very agreeable interest for you." "Good heavens!" cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Razumihin could not sit still on his chair. "Aren't you ashamed now, sister?" asked Raskolnikov. "I am ashamed, Rodya," said Dunya. "Pyotr Petrovitch, go away." She turned to him, white with anger. Pyotr Petrovitch had apparently not at all expected such a conclusion. He had too much confidence in himself, in his power, and in the helplessness of his victims. He could not believe it even now. He turned pale, and his lips quivered. "Avdotia Romanovna, if I go out of this door now, after such a dismissal, then, you may reckon on it, I will never come back. Consider what you are doing. My word is not to be shaken." "What insolence!" cried Dunya, springing up from her seat. "I don't want you to come back again." "What?" "So that's how it stands!" cried Luzin, utterly unable to the last moment to believe in the rupture, and so completely thrown out of his reckoning now. "So that's how it stands. But do you know, Avdotia Romanovna, that I might protest?" "What right have you to speak to her like that?" Pulcheria Alexandrovna intervened hotly. "And what can you protest about? What rights have you? Am I to give my Dunya to a man like you? Go away, leave us all together. I had to blame for having agreed to a wrong action, and I above all. But you have bound me, Pulcheria Alexandrovna." Luzin stormed in a frenzy. "By your promise, and now you deny it, and, besides, I have been led on account of that into expenses." This last complaint was so characteristic of Pyotr Petrovitch that Raskolnikov, pale with anger and with the effort of restraining it, could not help breaking into laughter. Pulcheria Alexandrovna was furious. "Expenses? What expenses? Are you speaking of our trunk? But the conductor brought it for nothing for you. Mercy on us, we have bound you. What are you thinking about, Pyotr Petrovitch? It was you bound us hand and foot, not we." "Enough, mother, no more please," Avdotia Romanovna implored. Pyotr Petrovitch, do be kind and go. I am going, but one last word, he said, quite unable to control himself. Your mamma seems to have entirely forgotten that I made up my mind to take you, so to speak, after the gossip of the town had spread all over the district in regard to your reputation. Disregarding public opinion for your sake and reinstating your reputation, I certainly might very well reckon on a fitting return, and might indeed look for gratitude on your part. And my eyes have only now been opened. I see myself that I may have acted very, very recklessly in disregarding the universal verdict. Does the fellow want his head smashed? Cried Razumihin, jumping up. You are a mean and spiteful man, cried Dunya. Not a word. Not a movement, cried Raskolnikov, holding Razumihin back, then going close up to Luzin. Kindly leave the room, he said quietly and distinctly, and not a word more or— Pyotr Petrovitch gazed at him for some seconds with a pale face that worked with anger. Then he turned, went out, and rarely has any man carried away in his heart such vindictive hatred as he felt against Raskolnikov. Him, and him alone, he blamed for everything. It is noteworthy that as he went downstairs he still imagined that his case was perhaps not utterly lost, and that, so far as the ladies were concerned, all might very well indeed be set right again. Chapter 3. The fact was that up to the last moment he had never expected such an ending. He had been overbearing to the last degree, never dreaming that two destitute and defenceless women could escape from his control. This conviction was strengthened by his vanity and conceit, a conceit to the point of fatuity. Pyotr Petrovitch, who had made his way up from insignificance, was morbidly given to self-admiration, had the highest opinion of his intelligence and capacities, and sometimes even gloated in solitude over his image in the glass. But what he loved and valued above all was the money he had amassed by his labour and by all sorts of devices that money made him the equal of all who had been his superiors. When he had bitterly reminded Dunya that he had decided to take her in spite of evil report, Pyotr Petrovitch had spoken with perfect sincerity, and had, indeed, felt genuinely indignant at such black ingratitude. And yet, when he made Dunya his offer, he was fully aware of the groundlessness of all the gossip. The story had been everywhere contradicted by Marfa Petrovna, and was by then disbelieved by all the townspeople who were warm in Dunya's defence. And he would not have denied that he knew all that at the time. Yet he still thought highly of his own resolution in lifting Dunya to his level, and regarded it as something heroic. In speaking of it to Dunya, he had let out the secret feeling he cherished and admired, and he could not understand that others should fail to admire it too. He had called on Raskolnikov with the feelings of a benefactor who is about to reap the fruits of his good deeds and to hear agreeable flattery. And as he went downstairs now, he considered himself most undeservedly injured and unrecognized. Dunya was simply essential to him. To do without her was unthinkable. For many years he had had voluptuous dreams of marriage, but he had gone on waiting and amassing money. He brooded with relish, in profound secret, over the image of a girl, virtuous, poor, she must be poor, very young, very pretty, of good birth and education, very timid, one who had suffered much and was completely humbled before him, one who would all her life look on him as her saviour, worship him, admire him, and only him. How many scenes, how many amorous episodes he had imagined on this seductive and playful theme, when his work was over. And, behold, the dream of so many years was all but realized. The beauty and education of Avdotya Romanovna had impressed him. Her helper's position had been a great allurement. In her he had found even more than he dreamed of. Here was a girl of pride, character, virtue, of education and breeding superior to his own, he felt that, and this creature would be slavishly grateful all her life for his heroic condescension, and would humble herself in the dust before him, and he would have absolute, unbounded power over her. And not long before he had too, after long reflection and hesitation, made an important change in his career, and was now entering on a wider circle of business. With this change, his cherished dreams of rising into a higher class of society seemed likely to be realized. He was, in fact, determined to try his fortune in Petersburg. He knew that women could do a very great deal. The fascination of a charming, virtuous, highly educated woman might make his way easier, might do wonders in attracting people to him, throwing an aureole round him, and now everything was in ruins. A sudden horrible rupture affected him like a clap of thunder. It was like a hideous joke, an absurdity. He had only been a tiny bit masterful, had not even time to speak out, had simply made a joke, been carried away, and it had ended so seriously. And of course, too, he did love Dunya in his own way. He already possessed her in his dreams, and all at once. No, the next day, the very next day, it must all be set right, smoothed over, settled. Above all, he must crush that conceited milksop who was the cause of it all. With a sick feeling he could not help recalling Razumihin too, but he soon reassured himself on that score, as though a fellow like that could be put on a level with him. The man he really dreaded in earnest was Svidrigaïlov. He had, in short, a great deal to attend to. "No, I am more to blame than anyone," said Dunya, kissing and embracing her mother. "I was tempted by his money, but on my honour, brother, I had no idea he was such a base man. If I had seen through him before, nothing would have tempted me. Don't blame me, brother. God has delivered us." "God has delivered us," Pulcheria Alexandrovna muttered, but half-consciously, as though scarcely able to realize what had happened. They were all relieved, and in 5 minutes they were laughing. Only now and then Dunya turned white and frowned, remembering what had passed. Pulcheria Alexandrovna was surprised to find that she too was glad she had only that morning thought rupture with Luzin a terrible misfortune. Razumihin was delighted. He did not yet dare to express his joy fully, but he was in a fever of excitement as though a ton weight had fallen off his heart. Now he had the right to devote his life to them, to serve them. Anything might happen now, but he felt afraid to think of further possibilities and dared not let his imagination range. But Raskolnikov sat still in the same place, almost sullen and indifferent. Though he had been the most insistent on getting rid of Luzin, he seemed now the least concerned at what had happened. Dunya could not help thinking that he was still angry with her, and Pulcheria Alexandrovna watched him timidly. "What did Svidrigaïlov say to you?" said Dunya, approaching him. Yes, yes, cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Raskolnikov raised his head. "He wants to make you a present of 10,000 roubles, and he desires to see you once in my presence." "See her, on no account," cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. "And how dare he offer her money?" Then Raskolnikov repeated, rather dryly, his conversation with Svidrigaïlov, omitting his account of the ghostly visitations of Marfa Petrovna, wishing to avoid all unnecessary talk. "What answer did you give him?" asked Dunya. "At first I said I would not take any message to you. Then he said that he would do his utmost to obtain an interview with you without my help. He assured me that his passion for you was a passing infatuation. Now he has no feeling for you. He doesn't want you to marry Luzin." His talk was altogether rather muddled. "How do you explain him to yourself, Rodya? How did he strike you?" "I must confess I don't quite understand him. He offers you 10,000 and yet says he is not well off. He says he is going away, and in 10 minutes he forgets he has said it. Then he says he is going to be married and has already fixed on the girl. No doubt he has a motive, and probably a bad one. But it's odd that he should be so clumsy about it if he had any designs against you. Of course, I refused this money on your account, once for all. Altogether, I thought him very strange. One might almost think he was mad. But I may be mistaken. That may only be the part he assumes. The death of Marfa Petrovna seems to have made a great impression on him." "God rest her soul," exclaimed Pulcheria Alexandrovna. "I shall always, always pray for her. Where should we be now, Dunya, without this 3,000? It's as though it had fallen from heaven." "Why, Rodya, this morning we had only 3 roubles in our pocket, and Dunya and I were just planning to pawn her watch, so as to avoid borrowing from that man until he offered help." Dunya seemed strangely impressed by Svidrigaïlov's offer. She still stood meditating. "He has got some terrible plan," she said in a half-whisper to herself, almost shuddering. Raskolnikov noticed this disproportionate terror. "I fancy I shall have to see him more than once again," he said to Dunya. "We will watch him. I will track him out," cried Razumihin vigorously. "I won't lose sight of him. Rodya has given me leave. He said to me himself just now. Take care of my sister." "Will you give me leave too, Avdotya Romanovna?" Dunya smiled and held out her hand, but the look of anxiety did not leave her face. Pulcheria Alexandrovna gazed at her timidly, but the 3,000 roubles had obviously a soothing effect on her. A quarter of an hour later, they were all engaged in a lively conversation. Even Raskolnikov listened attentively for some time, though he did not talk. Razumihin was the speaker. "And why? Why should you go away?" he flowed on ecstatically. "And what are you to do in a little town? The great thing is, you are all here together and you need one another. You do need one another, believe me. For a time, anyway. Take me into partnership, and I assure you we'll plan a capital enterprise. Listen, I'll explain it all in detail to you, the whole project. It all flashed into my head this morning, before anything had happened. I tell you what, I have an uncle. I must introduce him to you, a most accommodating and respectable old man. This uncle has got a capital of 1,000 roubles, and he lives on his pension and has no need of that money. For the last 2 years he has been bothering me to borrow it from him and pay him 6% interest. I know what that means. He simply wants to help me. Last year I had no need of it, but this year I resolved to borrow it as soon as he arrived. Then you lend me another 1,000 of your 3, and we have enough for a start, so we'll go into partnership, and what are we going to do?" Then Razumihin began to unfold his project, and he explained at length that almost all our publishers and booksellers know nothing at all of what they are selling, and for that reason they are usually bad publishers, and that any decent publications pay as a rule and give a profit, sometimes a considerable one. Razumihin had indeed been dreaming of setting up as a publisher. For the last 2 years he had been working in publishers' offices and knew 3 European languages well, though he had told Raskolnikov 6 days before that he was Schwach in German, with an object of persuading him to take half his translation and half the payment for it. He had told a lie then, and Raskolnikov knew he was lying. Why should we let our chance slip when we have one of the chief means of success? Money of our own, cried Razumihin warmly. Of course there will be a lot of work, but we will work, you, Avdotya Romanovna, I, Rodiona. You get a splendid profit on some books nowadays. And the great point of the business is that we shall know just what wants translating, and we shall be translating, publishing, learning all at once. I can be of use because I have experience. For nearly 2 years I've been scuttling about among the publishers, and now I know every detail of their business. You need not be a saint to make pots, believe me. And why? Why should we let our chance slip? Why, I know. And I kept the secret. 2 or 3 books which one might get 100 roubles simply for thinking of translating and publishing. Indeed, and I would not take 500 for the very idea of one of them. And what do you think? If I were to tell a publisher, I dare say he'd hesitate. They are such blockheads. And as for the business side, printing, paper, selling, you trust to me. I know my way about. We'll begin in a small way and go on to a large. In any case, it will get us our living, and we shall get back our capital. Dunya's eyes shone. I like what you are saying, Dmitri Prokofitch, she said. I know nothing about it, of course, put in Pulcheria Alexandrovna. It may be a good idea, but again, God knows, it's new and untried. Of course, we must remain here at least for a time. She looked at Rodya. What do you think, brother? Said Dunya. I think he's got a very good idea, he answered. Of course, it's too soon to dream of a publishing firm, but we certainly might bring out 5 or 6 books and be sure of success. I know of one book myself which would be sure to go well. And as for his being able to manage it, there's no doubt about that either. He knows the business, but we can talk it over later. Hurrah! Cried Razumihin. Now, stay, there's a flat here in this house, belonging to the same owner. It's a special flat apart, not communicating with these lodgings. It's furnished, rent moderate, 3 rooms. Suppose you take them to begin with. I'll pawn your watch tomorrow and bring you the money, and everything can be arranged then. You can all three live together, and Rodya will be with you. But where are you off to, Rodya? What, Rodya, you are going already? Pulcheria Alexandrovna asked in dismay. At such a minute? Cried Razumihin. Dunya looked at her brother with incredulous wonder. He held his cap in his hand. He was preparing to leave them. One would think you were burying me or saying goodbye forever, he said somewhat oddly. He attempted to smile, but it did not turn out a smile. But who knows? Perhaps it is the last time we shall see each other. He let slip accidentally. It was what he was thinking, and it somehow was uttered aloud. What is the matter with you? Cried his mother. Where are you going, Rodya? Asked Dunya rather strangely. Oh, I'm quite obliged to, he answered vaguely, as though hesitating what he would say. But there was a look of sharp determination in his white face. I meant to say, as I was coming here, I meant to tell you, mother, and you, Dunya, that it would be better for us to part for a time. I feel ill. I am not at peace. I will come afterwards. I will come of myself, when it's possible. I remember you and love you. Leave me alone. I decided this even before. I'm absolutely resolved on it. Whatever may come to me, whether I come to ruin or not, I want to be alone. Forget me altogether, it's better. Don't inquire about me. When I can, I'll come of myself, or I'll send for you. Perhaps it will all come back, but now if you love me, give me up. Else I shall begin to hate you. I feel it. Goodbye. Good God! Cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Both his mother and his sister were terribly alarmed. Razumihin was also. Rodya, Rodya, be reconciled with us. Let us be as before, cried his poor mother. He turned slowly to the door and slowly went out of the room. Dunya overtook him. Brother, what are you doing to mother? She whispered, her eyes flashing with indignation. He looked dully at her. No matter, I shall come, I'm coming, he muttered in an undertone, as though not fully conscious of what he was saying, and he went out of the room. Wicked, heartless egoist, cried Dunya. He is insane, but not heartless. He is mad, don't you see it? You're heartless after that. Razumihin whispered in her ear, squeezing her hand tightly. I shall be back directly, he shouted to the horror-stricken mother, and he ran out of the room. Raskolnikov was waiting for him at the end of the passage. I knew you would run after me, he said. Go back to them. Be with them tomorrow and always. Perhaps I shall come, if I can. Goodbye. And without holding out his hand, he walked away. But where are you going? What are you doing? What's the matter with you? How can you go on like this? Razumihin muttered, at his wit's end. Raskolnikov stopped once more. Once for all, never ask me about anything. I have nothing to tell you. Don't come to see me. Maybe I'll come here. Leave me, but don't leave them. Do you understand me? It was dark in the corridor. They were standing near the lamp. For a minute they were looking at one another in silence. Razumihin remembered that minute all his life. Raskolnikov's burning and intent eyes grew more penetrating every moment, piercing into his soul, into his consciousness. Suddenly Razumihin started. Something strange, as it were, passed between them. Some idea, some hint, as it were, slipped, something awful, hideous, and suddenly understood on both sides. Razumihin turned pale. Do you understand now? Said Raskolnikov, his face twitching nervously. Go back, go to them, he said suddenly, and turning quickly, he went out of the house. I will not attempt to describe how Razumihin went back to the ladies, how he soothed them, how he protested that Rodya needed rest in his illness, protested that Rodya was sure to come, that he would come every day, that he was very, very much upset, that he must not be irritated, that Razumihin would watch over him, would get him a doctor, the best doctor, a consultation. In fact, from that evening, Razumihin took his place with them as a son and a brother. Chapter 4. Raskolnikov went straight to the house on the canal bank where Sonia lived. It was an old greenhouse of 3 stories. He found the porter and obtained from him vague directions as to the whereabouts of Kapernamov, the tailor. Having found in the corner of the courtyard the entrance to the dark and narrow staircase, he mounted to the 2nd floor and came out into a gallery that ran round the whole 2nd story over the yard. While he was wandering in the darkness, uncertain where to turn for Kapernamov's door, a door opened 3 paces from him. He mechanically took hold of it. "Who is there?" a woman's voice asked uneasily. "It's I, come to see you," answered Raskolnikov, and he walked into the tiny entry. On a broken chair stood a candle in a battered copper candlestick. "It's you, good heavens!" cried Sonia weakly, and she stood rooted to the spot. "Which is your room?" "This way," and Raskolnikov, trying not to look at her, hastened in. A minute later Sonia too came in with the candle, set down the candlestick and, completely disconcerted, stood before him inexpressibly agitated and apparently frightened by his unexpected visit. The colour rushed suddenly to her pale face and tears came into her eyes. She felt sick and ashamed and happy too. Raskolnikov turned away quickly and sat on a chair by the table. He scanned the room in a rapid glance. It was a large but exceedingly low-pitched room, the only one let by the Kapernamovs, to whose rooms a closed door led in the wall on the left. In the opposite side, on the right-hand wall, was another door, always kept locked. That led to the next flat, which formed a separate lodging. Sonia's room looked like a barn. It was a very irregular quadrangle, and this gave it a grotesque appearance. A wall with 3 windows looking out onto the canal ran aslant so that one corner formed a very acute angle, and it was difficult to see in it without very strong light. The other corner was disproportionately obtuse. There was scarcely any furniture in the big room. In the corner on the right was a bedstead, beside it, nearest the door, a chair. A plain deal table covered by a blue cloth stood against the same wall, close to the door into the other flat. 2 rush-bottom chairs stood by the table. On the opposite wall, near the acute angle, stood a small plain wooden chest of drawers, looking, as it were, lost in a desert. That was all there was in the room. The yellow, scratched and shabby wallpaper was black in the corners. It must have been damp and full of fumes in the winter. There was every sign of poverty. Even the bedstead had no curtain. Sonia looked in silence at her visitor, who was so attentively and unceremoniously scrutinizing her room, and even began at last to tremble with terror, as though she was standing before her judge and the arbiter of her destinies. "I am late. It's 11, isn't it?" he asked, still not lifting his eyes. "Yes," muttered Sonia. "Oh, yes, it is," she added hastily, as though in that lay her means of escape. "My landlady's clock has just struck. I heard it myself." "I've come to you for the last time," Raskolnikov went on gloomily, although this was the first time. "I may perhaps not see you again. Are you going away? I don't know, tomorrow. Then you are not coming to Katerina Ivanovna tomorrow?" Sonia's voice shook. "I don't know. I shall know tomorrow morning." "Never mind that. I've come to say one word." He raised his brooding eyes to her and suddenly noticed that he was sitting down while she was all the while standing before him. "Why are you standing? Sit down," he said in a changed voice, gentle and friendly. She sat down. He looked kindly and almost compassionately at her. "How thin you are! What a hand! Quite transparent, like a dead hand." He took her hand. Sonia smiled faintly. "I've always been like that," she said. "Even when you lived at home." "Yes." "Of course you were," he added abruptly, and the expression of his face and the sound of his voice changed again suddenly. He looked round him once more. "You rent this room from the Kapernamovs?" "Yes." "They live there through that door?" "Yes." "They have another room like this, all in one room?" "Yes." "I should be afraid in your room at night," he observed gloomily. "They are very good people, very kind," answered Sonia, who still seemed bewildered. "And all the furniture, everything is theirs. And they are very kind, and the children, too, often come to see me. They all stammer, don't they?" "Yes, he stammers and he's lame." "And his wife, too?" "It's not exactly that she stammers, but she can't speak plainly. She is a very kind woman, and he used to be a house serf. And there are 7 children, and it's only the eldest one that stammers, and the others are simply ill, but they don't stammer." "But where did you hear about them?" she added with some surprise. "Your father told me then. He told me all about you, and how you went out at 6 o'clock and came back at 9, and how Katerina Ivanovna knelt down by your bed." Sonia was confused. "I fancied I saw him today," she whispered hesitatingly. "Whom?" "Father. I was walking in the street, out there at the corner, about 10 o'clock, and he seemed to be walking in front. It looked just like him. I wanted to go to Katerina Ivanovna. You were walking in the streets?" "Yes," Sonia whispered abruptly, again overcome with confusion and looking down. "Katerina Ivanovna used to beat you, I dare say." "Oh, no! What are you saying? No!" Sonia looked at him almost with dismay. "You love her, then?" "Love her?" "Of course," said Sonia with plaintive emphasis, and she clasped her hands in distress. "Ah, you don't. If you only knew. You see, she is quite like a child. Her mind is quite unhinged, you see, from sorrow. And how clever she used to be, how generous, how kind. Ah, you don't understand, you don't understand." Sonia said this as though in despair, wringing her hands in excitement and distress. Her pale cheeks flushed. There was a look of anguish in her eyes. It was clear that she was stirred to the very depths, that she was longing to speak, to champion, to express something. A sort of insatiable compassion, if one may so express it, was reflected in every feature of her face. "Beat me? How can you? Good heavens, beat me! And if she did beat me, what then? What of it? You know nothing, nothing about it. She is so unhappy, ah, how unhappy, and ill. She is seeking righteousness, she is pure. She has such faith that there must be righteousness everywhere, and she expects it. And if you were to torture her, she wouldn't do wrong. She doesn't see that it's impossible for people to be righteous, and she is angry at it. Like a child, like a child. She is good." "And what will happen to you?" Sonia looked at him inquiringly. "They are left on your hands, you see. They were all on your hands before, though, and your father came to you to beg for drink. Well, how will it be now?" "I don't know," Sonia articulated mournfully. "Will they stay there?" "I don't know. They are in debt for the lodging, but the landlady, I hear, said today that she wanted to get rid of them, and Katerina Ivanovna says that she won't stay another minute." "How is it she is so bold? She relies upon you?" "Oh, no, don't talk like that. We are one. We live like one." Sonia was agitated again and even angry, as though a canary or some other little bird were to be angry. "And what could she do? What could she do?" she persisted, getting hot and excited. "And how she cried today! Her mind is unhinged, haven't you noticed it? At 1 minute she is worrying like a child that everything should be right tomorrow, the lunch and all that. Then she is wringing her hands, spitting blood, weeping, and all at once she will begin knocking her head against the wall in despair. Then she will be comforted again. She builds all her hopes on you. She says that you will help her now, and that she will borrow a little money somewhere and go to her native town with me and set up a boarding school for the daughters of gentlemen and take me to superintend it, and we will begin a new, splendid life. And she kisses and hugs me, comforts me, and you know she has such faith in her fancies. One can't contradict her. And all the day long she has been washing, cleaning, mending. She dragged the washtub into the room with her feeble hands and sank on the bed, gasping for breath. We went this morning to the shops to buy shoes for Polenka, and Lida for theirs are quite worn out. Only the money we'd reckoned wasn't enough, not nearly enough. And she picked out such dear little boots, for she has taste you don't know. And there in the shop she burst out crying before the shopman, because she hadn't enough. Ah, it was sad to see her. "Well, after that, I can understand your living like this," Raskolnikov said with a bitter smile. "And aren't you sorry for them? Aren't you sorry?" Sonia flew at him again. "Why, I know, you gave your last penny yourself, though you'd seen nothing of it, and if you'd seen everything, oh dear. And how often I've brought her to tears. Only last week. Yes, only a week before his death. I was cruel, and how often I've done it. Ah, I've been wretched at the thought of it all day." Sonia wrung her hands as she spoke at the pain of remembering it. "You were cruel? Yes. I went to see them," she went on, weeping, "and father said, 'Read me something, Sonia, my head aches. Read to me, here's a book.' He had a book. He had got from Andrei Semyonovitch Lebeziatnikov. He lives there. He always used to get hold of such funny books. And I said, I can't stay, as I didn't want to read, and I'd gone in chiefly to show Katerina Ivanovna some collars. Lizaveta, the peddler, sold me some collars and cuffs, cheap, pretty, new, embroidered ones. Katerina Ivanovna liked them very much. She put them on and looked at herself in the glass and was delighted with them. "Make me a present of them, Sonia," she said. "Please do." "Please do," she said. She wanted them so much, and when could she wear them? They just reminded her of her old happy days. She looked at herself in the glass, admired herself, and she has no clothes at all, no things of her own, hasn't had all these years. And she never asks anyone for anything. She is proud. She'd sooner give away everything. And these she asked for. She liked them so much. And I was sorry to give them. "What use are they to you, Katerina Ivanovna?" I said. I spoke like that to her. I ought not to have said that. She gave me such a look, and she was so grieved at my refusing her, and it was so sad to see. And she was not grieved for the collars, but for my refusing. I saw that. Ah, if only I could bring it all back, change it, take back those words. Ah, if I. But it's nothing to you. Did you know Lizaveta, the peddler? Yes. Did you know her? Sonia asked with some surprise. Katerina Ivanovna is in consumption, rapid consumption. She will soon die, said Raskolnikov after a pause, without answering her question. Oh, no, no, no! And Sonia unconsciously clutched both his hands, as though imploring that she should not. But it will be better if she does die. No, not better, not at all better, Sonia unconsciously repeated in dismay. And the children? What can you do except take them to live with you? Oh, I don't know, cried Sonia, almost in despair, and she put her hands to her head. It was evident that that idea had very often occurred to her before, and he had only roused it again. And what if even now, while Katerina Ivanovna is alive, you get ill and are taken to the hospital, what will happen then? He persisted pitilessly. How can you? That cannot be. And Sonia's face worked with awful terror. Cannot be? Raskolnikov went on with a harsh smile. You are not insured against it, are you? What will happen to them then? They will be in the street, all of them. She will cough and beg and knock her head against some wall, as she did today, and the children will cry. Then she will fall down, be taken to the police station and to the hospital. She will die, and the children— oh no, God will not let it be— broke at last from Sonia's overburdened bosom. She listened, looking imploringly at him, clasping her hands in dumb entreaty, as though it all depended upon him. Raskolnikov got up and began to walk about the room. A minute passed. Sonia was standing with her hands and her head hanging in terrible dejection. "And can't you save? Put by for a rainy day?" he asked, stopping suddenly before her. "No," whispered Sonia. "Of course not. Have you tried?" he added almost ironically. "Yes, and it didn't come off. Of course not. No need to ask." And again he paced the room. Another minute passed. "You don't get money every day." Sonia was more confused than ever, and colour rushed into her face again. "No," she whispered with a painful effort. "It will be the same with Polenka, no doubt," he said suddenly. "No, no, it can't be. No!" Sonia cried aloud in desperation, as though she had been stabbed. "God would not allow anything so awful. He lets others come to it." "No, no, God will protect her, God," she repeated beside herself. "But perhaps there is no God at all," Raskolnikov answered with a sort of malignance, laughed and looked at her. Sonia's face suddenly changed. A tremor passed over it. She looked at him with unutterable reproach, tried to say something, but could not speak, and broke into bitter, bitter sobs, hiding her face in her hands. "You say Katerina Ivanovna's mind is unhinged. Your own mind is unhinged," he said after a brief silence. 5 minutes passed. He still paced up and down the room in silence, not looking at her. At last he went up to her, his eyes glittered. He put his 2 hands on her shoulders and looked straight into her tearful face. His eyes were hard, feverish and piercing, his lips were twitching. All at once he bent down quickly and, dropping to the ground, kissed her foot. Sonia drew back from him as from a madman, and certainly he looked like a madman. "What are you doing to me?" she muttered, turning pale, and a sudden anguish clutched at her heart. He stood up at once. "I did not bow down to you. I bowed down to all the suffering of humanity," he said wildly, and walked away to the window. "Listen," he added, turning to her a minute later. "I said just now to an insolent man that he was not worth your little finger, and that I did my sister honour making her sit beside you." "Ach, you said that to them, and in her presence," cried Sonia, frightened. "Sit down with me and honour." "Why, I'm dishonourable. Ah, why did you say that?" "It was not because of your dishonour and your sin I said that of you, but because of your great suffering. But you are a great sinner, that's true," he added almost solemnly, "and your worst sin is that you have destroyed and betrayed yourself for nothing. Isn't that fearful? Isn't it fearful that you are living in this filth which you loathe so, and at the same time you know yourself, you've only to open your eyes, that you are not helping anyone by it, not saving anyone from anything? Tell me," he went on almost in a frenzy, "how this shame and degradation can exist in you, side by side with other, opposite, holy feelings. It would be better, 1,000 times better and wiser to leap into the water and end it all." "But what would become of them?" Sonia asked faintly, gazing at him with eyes of anguish, but not seeming surprised at his suggestion. Raskolnikov looked strangely at her. He read it all in her face, so she must have had that thought already, perhaps many times, and earnestly she had thought out in her despair how to end it, and so earnestly that now she scarcely wondered at his suggestion. She had not even noticed the cruelty of his words. The significance of his reproaches and his peculiar attitude to her shame she had, of course, not noticed either, and that too was clear to him. But he saw how monstrously the thought of her disgraceful, shameful position was torturing her and had long tortured her. What, he thought, could hitherto have hindered her from putting an end to it? Only then he realized what those poor little orphan children and that pitiful half-crazy Katerina Ivanovna, knocking her head against the wall in her consumption, meant for Sonia. But nevertheless, it was clear to him again that with her character and the amount of education she had after all received, she could not, in any case, remain so. He was still confronted by the question, how could she have remained so long in that position without going out of her mind, since she could not bring herself to jump into the water? Of course he knew that Sonia's position was an exceptional case, though unhappily not unique and not infrequent, indeed, but that very exceptionalness, her tint of education, her previous life might, one would have thought, have killed her at the first step on that revolting path. What held her up? Surely not depravity. All that infamy had obviously only touched her mechanically. Not one drop of real depravity had penetrated to her heart. He saw that. He saw through her as she stood before him. There are 3 ways before her, he thought: the canal, the madhouse, or at last to sink into depravity which obscures the mind and turns the heart to stone. The last idea was the most revolting, but he was a skeptic. He was young, abstract, and therefore cruel, and so he could not help believing that the last end was the most likely. But can that be true? He cried to himself. Can that creature who has still preserved the purity of her spirit be consciously drawn at last into that sink of filth and iniquity? Can the process already have begun? Can it be that she has only been able to bear it till now, because vice has begun to be less loathsome to her? No, no, that cannot be, he cried, as Sonia had just before. No, what has kept her from the canal till now is the idea of sin, and they the children. And if she has not gone out of her mind, but who says she has not gone out of her mind? Is she in her senses? Can one talk? Can one reason as she does? How can she sit on the edge of the abyss of loathsomeness into which she is slipping and refuse to listen when she is told of danger? Does she expect a miracle? No doubt she does. Doesn't that all mean madness? He stayed obstinately at that thought. He liked that explanation indeed better than any other. He began looking more intently at her. So you pray to God a great deal, Sonia? He asked her. Sonia did not speak. He stood beside her, waiting for an answer. What should I be without God? She whispered rapidly, forcibly glancing at him with suddenly flashing eyes and squeezing his hand. Ah, so that is it, he thought. And what does God do for you? He asked, probing her further. Sonia was silent a long while, as though she could not answer. Her weak chest kept heaving with emotion. Be silent! Don't ask! You don't deserve! She cried suddenly, looking sternly and wrathfully at him. That's it, he repeated to himself. He does everything, she whispered quickly, looking down again. That's the way out, that's the explanation, he decided, scrutinizing her with eager curiosity, with a new, strange, almost morbid feeling. He gazed at that pale, thin, irregular, angular little face, those soft blue eyes, which could flash with such fire, such stern energy, that little body still shaking with indignation and anger, and it all seemed to him more and more strange, almost impossible. She is a religious maniac, he repeated to himself. There was a book lying on the chest of drawers. He had noticed it every time he paced up and down the room. Now he took it up and looked at it. It was the New Testament in the Russian translation. It was bound in leather, old and worn. Where did you get that? He called to her across the room. She was still standing in the same place, 3 steps from the table. It was brought me, she answered, as it were unwillingly, not looking at him. Who brought it? Lizaveta, I asked her for it. Lizaveta, strange, he thought. Everything about Sonia seemed to him stranger and more wonderful every moment. He carried the book to the candle and began to turn over the pages. Where is the story of Lazarus? He asked suddenly. Sonia looked obstinately at the ground and would not answer. She was standing sideways to the table. Where is the raising of Lazarus? Find it for me, Sonia. She stole a glance at him. You are not looking in the right place. It's in the 4th Gospel, she whispered sternly, without looking at him. Find it and read it to me, he said. He sat down with his elbow on the table, leaned his head on his hand and looked away sullenly, prepared to listen. In 3 weeks' time, they'll welcome me in the madhouse. I shall be there if I am not in a worse place, he muttered to himself. Sonia heard Raskolnikov's request distrustfully and moved hesitatingly to the table. She took the book, however. Haven't you read it? She asked, looking up at him across the table. Her voice became sterner and sterner. Long ago, when I was at school. Read. And haven't you heard it in church? I haven't been. Do you often go? No, whispered Sonia. Raskolnikov smiled. I understand. And you won't go to your father's funeral tomorrow? Yes, I shall. I was at church last week too. I had a requiem service. For whom? For Lizaveta. She was killed with an axe. His nerves were more and more strained. His head began to go round. Were you friends with Lizaveta? Yes. She was good. She used to come, not often, she couldn't. We used to read together and talk. She will see God. The last phrase sounded strange in his ears, and here was something new again, the mysterious meetings with Lizaveta and both of them, religious maniacs. I shall be a religious maniac myself soon. It's infectious! Read! He cried irritably and insistently. Sonia still hesitated. Her heart was throbbing. She hardly dared to read to him. He looked almost with exasperation at the unhappy lunatic. What for? You don't believe? She whispered softly, and as it were breathlessly. Read, I want you to, he persisted. You used to read to Lizaveta. Sonia opened the book and found the place. Her hands were shaking. Her voice failed her. Twice she tried to begin and could not bring out the first syllable. Now a certain man was sick named Lazarus of Bethany. She forced herself at last to read, but at the 3rd word her voice broke like an overstrained string. There was a catch in her breath. Raskolnikov saw in part why Sonia could not bring herself to read to him, and the more he saw this, the more roughly and irritably he insisted on her doing so. He understood only too well how painful it was for her to betray and unveil all that was her owner. He understood that these feelings really were her secret treasure, which she had kept perhaps for years, perhaps from childhood. while she lived with an unhappy father and a distracted stepmother crazed by grief, in the midst of starving children and unseemly abuse and reproaches. But at the same time he knew now, and knew for certain that, although it filled her with dread and suffering, yet she had a tormenting desire to read and to read to him, that he might hear it, and to read now whatever might come of it. He read this in her eyes, he could see it in her intense emotion. She mastered herself, controlled the spasm in her throat, and went on reading the 11th chapter of St. John. She went on to the 19th verse, and many of the Jews came to Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary sat still in the house. Then said Martha unto Jesus, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. But I know that even now whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it thee. Then she stopped again with a shamefaced feeling that her voice would quiver and break again. Jesus said unto her, Thy brother shall rise again. Martha saith unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said unto her, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this? She saith unto him. And drawing a painful breath, Sonia read distinctly and forcibly, as though she were making a public confession of faith. Yea, Lord, I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of God, which should come into the world. She stopped and looked up quickly at him, but controlling herself went on reading. Raskolnikov sat without moving, his elbows on the table and his eyes turned away. She read to the 32nd verse. Then when Mary was come where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying unto him, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping which came with her, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled, and said, Where have ye laid him? They said unto him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. Then said the Jews, Behold how he loved him. And some of them said, Could not this man which opened the eyes of the blind have caused that even this man should not have died? Raskolnikov turned and looked at her with emotion. Yes, he had known it. She was trembling in a real physical fever. He had expected it. She was getting near the story of the greatest miracle, and a feeling of immense triumph came over her. Her voice rang out like a bell. Triumph and joy gave it power. The lines danced before her eyes, but she knew what she was reading by heart. At the last verse, could not this man which opened the eyes of the blind, dropping her voice, she passionately reproduced the doubt, the reproach and censure of the blind, disbelieving Jews, who in another moment would fall at his feet as though struck by thunder, sobbing and believing. And he too is blinded and unbelieving. He too will hear. He too will believe. Yes, yes, yes. At once now was what she was dreaming, and she was quivering with happy anticipation. Jesus therefore again, groaning in himself, cometh to the grave. It was a cave, and a stone lay upon it. Jesus said, Take ye away the stone. Martha, the sister of him that was dead, saith unto him, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days. She laid emphasis on the word 4. Jesus saith unto her, said I, not unto thee that if thou wouldest believe, thou shouldest see the glory of God. Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me. And I knew that thou hearest me always, but because of the people which stand by I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me. And when he thus had spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he that was dead came forth, she read loudly, cold and trembling with ecstasy, as though she were seeing it before her eyes. Bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin. Jesus saith unto them, Loose him, and let him go. Then many of the Jews which came to Mary, and had seen the things which Jesus did, believed on him. She could read no more, closed the book, and got up from her chair quickly. That is all about the raising of Lazarus, she whispered severely and abruptly, and turning away she stood motionless, not daring to raise her eyes to him. She still trembled feverishly. The candle end was flickering out in the battered candlestick, dimly lighting up in the poverty-stricken room the murderer and the harlot who had so strangely been reading together the eternal book. 5 minutes or more passed. "I came to speak of something," Raskolnikov said aloud, frowning. He got up and went to Sonia. She lifted her eyes to him in silence. His face was particularly stern, and there was a sort of savage determination in it. "I have abandoned my family today," he said, "my mother and sister. I am not going to see them. I've broken with them completely." "What for?" asked Sonia, amazed. Her recent meeting with his mother and sister had left a great impression which she could not analyze. She heard his news almost with horror. "I have only you now," he added. "Let us go together. I've come to you. We are both accursed. Let us go our way together." His eyes glittered, as though he were mad, Sonia thought in her turn. "Go where?" she asked in alarm, and she involuntarily stepped back. "How do I know? I only know it's the same road. I know that and nothing more. It's the same goal." She looked at him and understood nothing. She knew only that he was terribly, infinitely unhappy. "No one of them will understand if you tell them, but I have understood. I need you. That is why I have come to you." "I don't understand," whispered Sonia. "You'll understand later. Haven't you done the same? You too have transgressed, have had the strength to transgress. You have laid hands on yourself. You have destroyed a life. Your own, it's all the same. You might have lived in spirit and understanding, but you'll end in the Haymarket. But you won't be able to stand it, and if you remain alone, you'll go out of your mind like me. You are like a mad creature already. So we must go together on the same road." "Let us go." "What for? What's all this for?" said Sonia, strangely and violently agitated by his words. "What for? Because you can't remain like this, that's why. You must look things straight in the face at last, and not weep like a child and cry that God won't allow it. What will happen if you should really be taken to the hospital tomorrow? She is mad and in consumption. She'll soon die, and the children. Do you mean to tell me Polenka won't come to grief? Haven't you seen children here at the street corners sent out by their mothers to beg? I've found out where those mothers live and in what surroundings. Children can't remain children there. At 7 the child is vicious and a thief. Yet children, you know, are the image of Christ. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. He bade us honor and love them. They are the humanity of the future." "What's to be done? What's to be done?" repeated Sonia, weeping hysterically and wringing her hands. "What's to be done? Break what must be broken, once for all, that's all, and take the suffering on oneself. What, you don't understand? You'll understand later. Freedom and power, and above all, power. Over all trembling creation and all the ant-heap. That's the goal, remember that. That's my farewell message. Perhaps it's the last time I shall speak to you. If I don't come tomorrow, you'll hear of it all, and then remember these words. And some day later on, in years to come, you'll understand perhaps what they meant. If I come tomorrow, I'll tell you who killed Lizaveta. Goodbye." Sonia started with terror. "Why, do you know who killed her?" she asked, chilled with horror, looking wildly at him. "I know and will tell you, only you. I have chosen you out. I'm not coming to you to ask forgiveness, but simply to tell you. I chose you out long ago to hear this. When your father talked of you, and when Lizaveta was alive, I thought of it. Goodbye, don't shake hands. Tomorrow." He went out. Sonia gazed at him as at a madman, but she herself was like one insane and felt it. Her head was going round. "Good heavens! How does he know who killed Lizaveta? What did those words mean? It's awful." But at the same time the idea did not enter her head, not for a moment. "Oh, he must be terribly unhappy. He has abandoned his mother and sister. What for? What has happened? And what had he in his mind? What did he say to her?" He had kissed her foot and said, yes, he had said it clearly, that he could not live without her. Oh, merciful heavens! Sonia spent the whole night feverish and delirious. She jumped up from time to time, wept and wrung her hands, then sank again into feverish sleep and dreamt of Polenka, Katerina Ivanovna and Lizaveta, of reading the Gospel and him with pale face, with burning eyes, kissing her feet, weeping. On the other side of the door on the right, which divided Sonia's room from Madame Resslich's flat, was a room which had long stood empty. A card was fixed on the gate and a notice stuck in the windows over the canal advertising it to let. Sonia had long been accustomed to the rooms being uninhabited. But all that time Mr. Svidrigailov had been standing, listening at the door of the empty room. When Raskolnikov went out, he stood still, thought a moment, went on tiptoe to his own room which adjoined the empty one, brought a chair and noiselessly carried it to the door that led to Sonia's room. The conversation had struck him as interesting and remarkable, and he had greatly enjoyed it. So much so that he brought a chair that he might not in the future, tomorrow for instance, have to endure the inconvenience of standing a whole hour, but might listen in comfort.